Star Wars games are plentiful, and thankfully not terribly difficult to acquire. Battlefront, the first one, came out back in 2004 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. Not only is it readily available on Steam for purchase, the multiplayer component, something I never got to experience as a kid, is up and running. There's even a map that was added to the PC and Xbox versions in a patch that my PS2 self never got to experience. Besides maybe September of 2004, there's never been a better time to put a couple dozen hours into one of the better Star Wars video games out there, so let's take a closer look. Star Wars Battlefront is a first or third-person shooter that lets you relive many of the classic battles from the films. Both eras are represented, Clone Wars and Galactic Civil War. There are different classes with their own unique weapons, in addition to turrets and vehicles depending on the map and faction you're playing as. The main goal of each encounter is to either dwindle the enemy reinforcements shown at the top to 0, or be in control of all the map's command posts. Command posts can be captured by standing near them and waiting for it to turn your color. If there are any enemies nearby, you can't flip it to your side, so take everyone out and continue the process. If you're alone, it goes moderately slow, but if you have allies with you, it goes much faster. Green is under your control, red is the enemy, and white is neutral. Afterwards, the command posts represent the locations you can spawn from once you die. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's the premise. The visuals aren't anything to write home about, but they get the job done. You can tell at a glance that it's Star Wars, which is more than I can say for the newer Battlefront games, so it has that going for it. Because the Star Wars canon has so many different and unique looking vehicles, locations, creatures, and droids, the game manages to be pleasant to look at the whole way through. You'll come across different types of droids all over, the taller Bacta droids heal you, the Gonk cube-shaped droids offer ammo, and the R2 looking guys heal damaged ships. The ships themselves are plentiful, and look like you'd expect they would from the films. This is the type of thing where it might seem strange to praise, as of course it isn't an original creation, it's what we see in the Star Wars universe, but even still, the fact that so many vehicles were included instead of choosing only a select few like the well-known AT-AT and Snowspeeder provides plenty of gameplay and visual variety. The attention to detail on a lot of these maps is what really brings home the experience. While walking through the water in Kashyyyk, you'll spot some fish minding their own business, and shooting the water gives you a nice splash effect as well. In Cloud City, one of the command post areas is the Carbon Freezing Chamber. You can even see Han in Frozen Carbonite. In Hoth, the Millennium Falcon is sitting in the hangar, and you can visit the base of operations in the tunnels. The constant rain effect on Kamino looks great. Mos Eisley has Jawas running all about, in addition to the cantina with the classic song playing in the background. On the topic of music, the sound design is really good. It's basically cheating since the source material was groundbreaking in that regard already, but even still it's worth praising. All the weaponry, turrets, and vehicles sound distinct, flooding your ears with a cacophony of hectic Star Wars action. When you're on the outskirts of battle, you can hear screams and gunshots in the distance, but when you're in the thick of it, it genuinely sounds like a lot of skirmishes are happening all around you. Not only do all of the weapons have their own designated sound effects, the same types of weapons sound different depending on the faction you're playing as. The explosions even have some variance to them, depending on what's going on. And of course, the music playing in the background brings the battle even closer to the Star Wars movie atmosphere. The voiceover work is pretty good as well. It's not quite as good as we'll eventually see with the sequel, but there are still a few good lines.
I hear something. Objective acquired.
Your commander pipes in about losing and gaining command posts,
We've captured a command post.
and will tell you whether you're about to lose or win.
Defeat is imminent.
However, that isn't always accurate. I also like the sounds the clones make when they take damage. The loading screens when entering a new map are some of the coolest I've ever seen or heard. Slowly zooming in on the location before the action starts is cool enough, but the sound effects that go with it are extremely satisfying. A nice subtle touch to the menus are the sci-fi sound they make when navigating. There's even that beeping noise when you choose a command post to spawn into.
Our reinforcements are taking casualties.
It's those little details that really make the experience that much better. With all that out of the way, we can get to the gameplay. When you start playing on any map, you'll choose the command post you want to spawn at, and the class you want to play as. Even before the action begins, you already have interesting decisions to make. Maybe you want to stay on the ground and push the tide in the middle of the map, or maybe you want to choose a spawn point that has a flying vehicle next to it to dogfight, or maybe even steal a command post from behind. Which command posts you hold could sway the battle considerably. For example, if you play as the Rebels and Hoth and lose the hangar spawn point, you no longer have easy access to snowspeeders, thus taking down the enemy AT-ATs is a much more difficult task. The command posts also dictate the reinforcement count. I don't know the specifics, but it seems that if you hold fewer command posts than the opposing side, your reinforcement count at the top drops much quicker. This has to be a behind-the-scenes trick with the numbers. It's not like if you capture an extra command post you can have 4 more soldiers on the front lines or something. It actually gets more confusing when you keep an eye on your reinforcement count at the start of the battle. Literally on Renvar, the game started dropping my numbers immediately. I find it hard to believe that my fellow soldiers were throwing grenades at themselves the moment they spawned in, but the AI is pretty suspect, so it's definitely possible. As stated in their first designer diary, this game was made primarily with the online multiplayer experience in mind first and foremost. They wanted to create a Star Wars game that would reward strategy, encourage team play, and be an overall balanced experience. With that in mind, let's take a look at the classes you can play as. All 4 of the factions have 4 classes that are similar to each other, and 1 unique unit. Nearly all of the units have a backup rechargeable blaster pistol and a grenade of some kind. The Trooper class is the most basic unit with a blaster rifle as their main weapon, which, true enough to the movies, proves to be very difficult to aim with if you just hold the trigger. Maybe that was the problem the Stormtroopers had, they just weren't bursting their shots. The clones and droids have more differences with them as well in this class. Clones don't have a traditional thermal detonator, but an EMP grenade, and the Super Battle Droid has wrist rockets, as well as the tri-shot instead of a pistol. These slight differences help the Clone Wars era feel distinct. There's an Assault class that is supposedly made for taking down vehicles, but to be honest, their rocket launcher does diddly squat when not pointed directly at a person. The landmines they carry are your best bet for doing heavy damage. I think they missed the mark on this being an anti-vehicle unit, as I would oftentimes just select him when I wanted to go around blowing ground infantry up.
Double kill.
This might be a case of the bots just being bad though, as I'm sure if you cooperated with other players, a few assault classes could take down vehicles with little issue. This is probably a more balanced unit when you have a full lobby of players, but since that's rarely what I ever experienced, it feels a bit weak. The Sharpshooter is one of the more overpowered classes, especially when compared to the assault unit. Their sniper rifle is extremely powerful, taking down every enemy except the unique variant in 2 hits, and headshots take them out in 1 hit. How far your sniper scope zooms in and how much ammo it houses before reloading depends on the faction. They also have a deployable recon droid. You can use it to scout ahead and maybe take out some enemies with its built-in pistol, but by far the most interesting aspect to it is the orbital strike. Once enough beeps have sounded, it drops about 4 or 5 shots from above, killing basically everyone nearby. Even though it's very strong, it is balanced out by being easily destroyed when spotted. The pilot has different weapons depending on which faction you have as well. For the Rebels, he has a shotgun type weapon. For the droids and Empire, he has a grenade launcher thing. And for the clones, he has a bolt caster. All of them are fairly decent. They also provide some support by throwing out packs of ammo and health, repairing destroyed turrets, droids, and ships with their fusion cutter, and when they're in a vehicle, its health regenerates constantly. I think this was a pretty good idea on paper, to have a class that's obviously supposed to be about utility and support, but since their main weapon is already pretty decent on its own, it can feel overpowered when you get to walk around healing yourself while gaining ammo. This is where the fun begins. Like I said before, each faction gets their own unique unit. The Rebels get the Wookiee, their health is buffed, and they're incredibly slow. Just look at this foot race, not a chance. The bowcaster is their main weapon, which can either be shot like a blaster or charged up for a wider spread. Their secondary weapon is a grenade launcher, which works pretty well for maps that favor grenades. They also have a unique time bomb, which does a high amount of damage after a few seconds. On the PC version it's 5 seconds, but I'm pretty sure the console version was 10 seconds. I don't really think the game capitalized on what makes Wookiees interesting, especially given that Battlefront came out before even Episode 3. Chewie was well known for flying off the handle, and we all know what happened when he lost at chess. It would have been interesting to see some brutish style of fighting like that, but that seemed to have only been translated into his higher health pool. The Empire has the Dark Trooper. Their main gimmick is their high-reaching jet booster. I say booster since you can't really maintain flight, you more so go very high, then fall down immediately, but it is useful for jumping over walls and gaps. If you see a bot play as the Dark Trooper, it really reminds me of Wallace in The Wrong Trousers. Just comically up and down, I can't unsee it.
Lummy day!
Their main weapon is the blast cannon, which is very similar to the pilot shotgun and super battle droid tri-shot. It's okay, I guess. Besides that, they don't have anything else, just some grenades and a pistol. It's kind of a letdown. Even more so if you expected him to play like a certain bounty hunter making his way through the galaxy. The resemblance is there, so I think some sort of rocket instead of the grenades would have been more interesting. For the Confederacy of Independent Systems, you have the Droideka. These units are an absolute nightmare. If you see an army of these guys, unless you're in a vehicle, you stand no chance. None. Even one-on-one with the Droideka is nearly certain death. They're one of the hardest units to fight since you have to wait so long for their shields to go down, and if you're out of grenades, your gunshots won't do much to lower the shields. Playing as them is fairly fun though, although fairly difficult to get used to. You can't strafe with these guys, so walking to the left means aiming to the left as well, which goes against how every other unit plays in the game. They're really fast when you roll around, outpacing every other class with ease. When you find your target, it takes some time to stand up, then you can deploy your shields with the secondary attack button. The blasters are incredibly damaging and are very hard to miss with, so strategic use of this unit could take out an entire squad. I think it's interesting how one-dimensional they are. They only have their blaster fire and shields. I kind of like that aspect of them, actually. Finally, the unique unit for the clones is a jetpack variant. The jetpack sustains flight for longer distances than the Dark Troopers, but what you gain in length you sacrifice with height, as you can only go as high as you jump initially. Their weapon of choice is an EMP grenade launcher, which is extremely potent if you get a direct hit. They too don't have any other advantage. A pistol and grenades are all you get with them as well. I like these guys a lot though. It's really fun to fly around shooting droids as you go. Since more often than not you'll be playing against bots, let's talk about the AI. It's hard to pin down. At times they may just stand around doing absolutely nothing. Sometimes they'll miss every single shot, as if on purpose. And other times they won't miss a single shot.
Their reinforcements are being depleted.
Your teammates also have bad AI, but more often in the stand around and do nothing or the friendly fire kind of way. They will throw grenades at themselves constantly or shoot you in the back for fun. Goddamn Wookiees. They might just walk right in front of a landmine without hesitation. Seriously, this happens so often. I have multiple examples on Renvar alone. It's not like they're hard to miss, they're right there on the ground. There's also this peculiar reoccurring thing where enemies will dodge roll the moment you press the fire button. I imagine they're reading my inputs, as there's no other way this could happen this often and be a coincidence. This is easiest to notice when sniping from afar, but it can happen with regular blaster shots as well. Your first shot might cause an enemy to jump out of the turret they were just in the moment you shoot. I just can't see any reason for the bot to do this besides attempting to avoid my sniper shot that they couldn't have seen coming. The turrets themselves have a lot of weirdness to them. They're extremely powerful against soldiers. One shot is usually all you need. The bots turn into sharpshooters when they're stationed in them for some reason. There's basically no way to avoid incoming fire when you're out in the open. It feels pretty cheap when you poke your head out just to get bopped with one shot. Again, on Renvar, I have many examples of this one particular thing happening over and over. However, the turrets take on a different light when shooting at them from long range. It makes enemies sitting ducks for sniper shots, and since the AI are drawn to hop in any unmanned turret for some reason, it's basically fish in a barrel. They line up for miles for their turn to get sniped. One after another, they're hypnotized by it. The allure of being in control of a turret is just too much for them. This is one of the best opportunities for headshots, but that's another issue with the game. The hurt boxes around enemies' heads are fairly inconsistent. Well, maybe it's just that headshot is the wrong word for it, as if you aim directly at their face, it seems to go smoother. The outsides of the stormtroopers' helmets, even though the reticule shows red, won't connect with your shots. It's easiest to see when they're in turrets, but when they're running around, it creates a doubt in your mind on where to aim. Since the top of the head doesn't count, you might aim too low to assure the hitbox issue won't happen, which could cost you the headshot, which of course could cost you your life. On a more positive note, it seems that all of the weapons are treated as projectiles instead of a hit scan, which is most appreciated. What I mean is, if you shoot at an enemy from far away, the shot doesn't connect the moment you shoot like you'd expect from a Call of Duty game or something. It's most clear to see when you and an enemy are strafing back and forth. You'll need to lead your shots a bit, otherwise you'll miss just to the side of them. When you kill an enemy, if they're on a sloped surface, you might see their corpse slide all the way down. This is something I really enjoyed about the physics of the game. It's not ragdoll ridiculousness or anything, but it can be quite comical at times. The best feeling is when you're on the Cloud City platforms and you jettison an enemy into the stratosphere. Even better when that enemy is Darth Vader. The heroes in this game are non-playable, indestructible slaughterhouses that mindlessly wander the battlefield in pursuit of their next victim. There's Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Count Dooku, and Mace Windu. They're all impossible forces of nature that seem to never be satisfied. You might not even see them, just witness their death count piling up at the bottom right. When they have you in their sight, you're in for a fright. Try as you might, you won't defeat them on this night. They will smite you down, much to their delight. It won't matter if you're polite or if you have a poem you wanted to recite. This definitely isn't the video's height, but this part of the script I didn't want to rewrite. Anyway, you will never be able to take them down with conventional strategies. This is easily something that could be seen as a negative, but I fucking love it. They basically have god level status. When you spot them charging you, it's genuinely terrifying. Them being invincible encourages some creative thinking on how to handle them as well. Running away is a good plan, but there are ways to actually take them down. The moment earlier on the platforms of Cloud City is a good example, but one I didn't capture on footage for the video, since it's so rare, is throwing a grenade at the perfect spot in the tunnel, yeeting him through the windows. It has happened before, and when it did, my friends and I screamed in excitement. Taking down Vader was our main focus, winning the battle was a tertiary objective. In Dune Sea on Tatooine, I discovered another extremely satisfying way to get past their invincibility. Darth Vader gets easily distracted if you shoot him enough times, so luring him to the outskirts of the map, where you die if you don't return to battle in time, was the perfect strategy. He just falls over. The game doesn't count it as your kill, but you know in your heart it was you that won the day. You can also draw him closer to the Zarlak pit and watch in delight as he gets grabbed, swallowed whole, and digested for hundreds of years. There's always a bigger fish. One concept that I think was absolute genius was the native species. Besides for the campaign mode though, it's only this map that has the functionality. On Dune Sea, you and your enemy start with 2 command posts, but so do the Tusken Raiders. It's essentially a 3-way fight, and there are no restrictions for the Tuskens, as they too can take over command posts. I really don't know why this couldn't have been done with the Gungans on Naboo, the Wookiees on Kashyyyk, and the Geonosians on Geonosis. I realize all of them do help out in the campaign mode a bit, and it wouldn't make as much sense since they're clearly allied with clones or droids in the movies, but Dune Sea has me yearning for more. Having a 3-way battle is so fun, I think I could overlook the inconsistency, especially if it was just an option you could toggle on or off. The vehicle combat is a phenomenal inclusion, as it combines with the variety the eras and factions already provide to produce lots of unique combat encounters depending on the map you're on and faction you're playing as. Maybe you can't stand the hills of Kashyyyk? Well, guess what? No worries, as you can fly around in the sky, taking down enemy starships to pass the time. The map of Geonosis has plenty on offer for the Clone Wars era. The droids get the wheelie doodads and the spider from Wild Wild West, and the clones have their ATTE, which of course is known for its turning. Not really, it crawls. The clones get their transport ship thing, and the droids Grand Theft Auto the Geonosian starships. My one complaint of this map would be that it's hard to tell when dogfighting if the ship you're shooting at is real or not. There's plenty of fake ships in the sky to make it seem like there's a bigger battle taking place. It would have been pretty cool if there could have been that many ships flying overhead. On Hoth, you have your snowspeeders, ATSTs, and AT-ATs, which are to be expected, but there's Tauntauns as well, in addition to a slew of turrets. This map is a good example of how unbalanced the game can feel when just playing with AI teammates. The focal point is the AT-AT, so it makes sense that they're hard to take down, but the only thing that works is the tow cables with the snowspeeder, and kinda sorta the white cylinder turrets. The missile launchers of course don't do much with only one person shooting them. The snowspeeder laser fire does diddly squat, and the dish turrets aren't as strong as they will eventually be in the sequel. So unless you have a very trustworthy AI companion, or you get lucky, these AT-ATs will cause you a lot of trouble without human allies. When you do manage to whittle them down, however, be careful on that last shot. Apparently it blows up and kills everything nearby, even though there's no explosion effect to explain it. It's pretty jarring. Dune Sea is a great map that provides all forms of vehicle combat. Take to the skies with the TIE fighters and X-Wings, or blast your way through with the AT-STs and these combat speeder things. There's also this skiff, but besides when you get a group of friends all jammed into one for fun, it's not really worth much. The best map for dogfighting is the platforms in Cloud City. There's so many ships to pick from, and it really seems designed with the sky battles in mind. X-Wings, Y-Wings, combat speeders, TIE fighters, and TIE interceptors are all available here. If you're not fond of aircraft combat, you can still take a ship to sneak into the enemy's base and capture a command post right under their nose. I do think this map has a severe balancing issue. The anti-air turrets are way too powerful. Not only can they take down air units with little problem, they can turn 360 degrees, kill any ground unit in one hit, take down other turrets easily, and their range spans a large portion of the map. One time I was the last one on my team, the voiceover guy told me defeat was imminent, but I just waited here in this turret sniping the foot soldiers from leagues away. I'm kind of glad they're only in this level. In total there are 17 maps with the addition of Jabba's Palace. A lot of them are familiar locations from the movies, but Renvar in particular is completely absent from any of the films. I don't know why it exists, but it has two of the better maps in the game, so I'm definitely cool with it. Citadel is a big architectural structure with many hallways, stairs, and choke points. One of the most unique things about it is when you begin, you don't have multiple spawn points to pick from. Each team only has one command post, all the others are neutral and are waiting to be captured. The other Renvar location, Harbor, has the greatest level design bit in the entire game. Now, I have no idea what the flow of battle was intended to look like in Harbor, but no matter what, the ice tunnel is the go-to battlefront. This stretch of ice is coveted, and both sides fight for it relentlessly. It's rare for any real progress to be had, but regardless, the majority of units killed in action in Harbor are right at the entrance to this tunnel. There's also an AT-AT on this map, but the fact that it's such an afterthought should speak volumes about the importance of the ice caves. Camino is a great map for snipers and jetpack troopers, and the rain effects look really nice. I really like the Yavin 4 arena. It's just chaos the moment you spawn in, as the opposite command post isn't too far away. I usually immediately start firing rockets or sniper shots, and it goes fairly well. The best bin maps are two of the most memorable in the game, and for good reason. I've already discussed some of the vehicular combat on platforms, but the tunnels provide a really nice close-quarter combat encounter. The same thing can be said for Cloud City. It has two main battlefronts, the courtyard down below and the hallways up top. The hallways provide the same level of intensity as the tunnels in the previous map. There's a satisfying feeling of incremental progress that's just hard to turn down. Dodging lasers and grenades, coming out of cover to fire at the newly spawned enemies, moving up to the next set of walls for cover, and repeat. Now, before I move on, I have to mention how much I detest Endor when playing as the Rebels. I have fond memories of taking a speeder bike all the way to the shield bunker and blowing it up with the Wookiees, but when playing it again as an adult, it's absurdly annoying for a few reasons. The speeder bike itself is extraordinarily difficult to control. If you nick anything in the level, you take damage and can blow up on the spot, and there are tree trunks and rocks all over, sometimes hidden behind foliage for you to ram into. This is also a good time to talk about how annoying the AI is when it comes to vehicles. If an AI is in a vehicle, you are able to take it over without any issues, but they just seem to know where the vehicles are way before you do. They spawn in, rush to the vehicle, and speed off before you can catch them. So you'll have to sit there, doing nothing, waiting for a speeder bike to respawn. What I did instead was restart the mission over and over until I got a speeder bike again. Once you make it to the shield bunker, we get a rerun of the turret issue. There's always stormtroopers stationed in these turrets, and they only need 1 or maybe 2 shots to take you down. This map also has Ewoks, and they're the scum of the galaxy, so all in all, this map is much better played as the Empire. You can play all of these maps in instant action mode, where you can choose which era you want to play with and start up a battle immediately. Instant action is the only mode available online. Cycling through planets and eras is fun, and the variety on offer from the maps to the classes will provide you with at least an hour or 2 before you start repeating content. In the multiplayer, there's a text chat feature, but it surprisingly doesn't work once a game ends, which is kind of odd. Playing against other humans is a complete shock to the system if you're used to playing against the regular AI in other modes. They don't just stand there and wait for you to shoot them, for the most part anyway. There isn't a whole lot of people playing online, since the sequel also has its online functionality, but you'll get a few people here and there. The biggest open lobby I've seen is about 7 or 8 players. There's a campaign mode, but there's not really much to talk about. You get a few movie clips before a battle. Your mission is always to capture the command posts or take the enemy reinforcements to 0 just like usual, and you get to play as both sides in the war during the era depending on the planet. You go through every map in the game besides Jabba's Palace. The only thing worth your time here are the first 3 levels of the Clone Wars campaign. It starts off with you playing as the CIS, first on both Naboo maps, then on the hills of Kashyyyk. What's so cool about this is you fight against the Gungans in the opening level with their own animal-powered shields, the Royal Guards in the second level with their specific types of vehicles, and finally the Wookiees on Kashyyyk. It's a nice change of pace if you're used to fighting droids or clones all the time. This is also the only time you can play as the non-super variant of the basic battle droid. There's nothing fancy about it, it's just the only time you can do it. The rest of the campaign, both Clone Wars and Galactic Civil War, go as you'd expect with nothing much to say. It's basically individual battles from all 6 films. Finally, the best mode.
In Galactic Conquest,
This is generally the mode everyone remembers the most fondly, and for good reason. The sequel was able to expand on this greatly, but the classic version is still pretty great. You and your AI opponent battle on individual planets one at a time, vying for control of the galaxy. To fully control a planet, you need to win there twice. Every planet you control grants you a bonus for you to use in battle, such as letting a hero play alongside you, more reinforcements, or extra health. You can't have more than 1 active at a time, however. You do have to choose which one you want to use before the battle starts. If you won the encounter, you pick where to attack next. If you lose, the enemy picks one of your planets to invade. When you or your opponent win 4 times, the home base's superpower is able to be used. If you're the rebels, it's liberating a planet instantly, granting you immediate control. If you're the Empire, it's destroying a planet completely with the Death Star. This mode is so great because it's just so simple. Really all it is a season-like framing device for instant action mode, making it feel overarching and grandiose while slightly modifying the gameplay depending on which power-up you've chosen. That's not a knock on it by any means. It's impressive how much this stretched my overall playtime with the game as a kid. I could play this mode for hours and hours. There's a total of 8 variants you can play with this as well. It mostly just changes which era you're in, which faction you'll play as, and which planets are available or in your control, so it's nothing that interesting. Even though I play this on PC these days, which has the extra map and online multiplayer, it has one incredibly significant downside that's hard to ignore. That clip talking about Galactic Conquest I just showed, it's not on the PC version. I thought I was going crazy when I couldn't get it to play, but sure enough, it's missing entirely. Every time you go to Galactic Conquest, it just shoots you into the game without the cutscene. It goes even further than that. The other video tutorials that are present on the Xbox version I have are missing from the PC version too. Since all of them are removed, I have to think it's an issue with the voice actor or something. I just don't see any other reason to remove them altogether. It's unfortunate too, since they do a solid job of explaining the game, and the "In Galactic Conquest" line in particular brings back a lot of nostalgia. Now, in this review, I tried to fight my bias, but I have to admit that this was my jam on the PS2 back when I was 11 or 12. I genuinely think it holds up fairly well, but this might come down to me not minding a few of the obvious issues it has, like the terribly inconsistent AI, the poor vehicle balancing on certain maps, and the sometimes absent hurt boxes for enemies' heads. If I played this game for the first time today, I don't know if I would like it as much, but I certainly loved it back then, and I have loved it ever since. This is one of our go-tos when my friends would hang out, taking turns with the co-op Galactic Conquest. Thanks to the PC version having online multiplayer, I still play it to this day with friends. If you're itching to get blasted by Tusken Raiders, Battlefront is a good time even to this day. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like, comment, and subscribe. I will probably have some Dead Rising content in the next few weeks. Yeah, so look out for that. Hope to see you next time. Have a good one.